Mr. Tilly's Seance. That is the story we are going to be discussing tonight. I am so excited to tell you this story. I think this seance is going to be different than most seances. It's different than any I've heard of. If you've been to a seance before, you should comment down below. Let me know how that went. Tell me what you think. Is it like a thing everybody should go and try? I'm not so sure after reading the story. So let's just get into it to find out what actually happens. I hope everybody's having a wonderful week. It is time to get cozy and comfy and listen to the story of Mr. Tilly's Seance. This story is by E.F. Benson. Oh my goodness, and I do think it's going to be delightful. Okay, so it starts off that Mr. Tilly, he is on his way to Mrs. Cumberbatch's seance. So he's heading there. He's going past Hyde Park. He's walking in the streets. And as he's walking, he slipped and fell. As he fell in the street, he's seen a tractor coming towards him. The tractor's coming towards him, and it's like he seen it in his mind. He was going to get run over by the tractor. He wasn't going to be able to get up in time. And, most of the time when you hear that in a story, the person gets up, woo, they made it. Okay, well, this isn't what's going to happen for Mr. Tilly. So he's correct. He fell. That tractor was coming, and the tractor rolled over him. The driver, it freaked the driver out. The driver drove over him, and then he reversed. I don't know. I guess thinking that maybe he didn't roll over him, even though he felt the tractor go through the thud. Anyway, he reversed. And yeah, that was kind of it. The tractor driver hops off the tractor. Now, Mr. Tilly, he had seen it happening. Obviously, he didn't get out from in front of it. So he felt excruciating pain. And then it was gone. The pain was just gone. So he said he felt it hurt for an instant or something, and then it was gone. And then he noticed that he was just floating or standing. He didn't know which, but he was in the middle of the road. So it was like there was no break in his conscience. He gets hit by the tractor. He has excruciating instant pain, and then it's gone. It's like a couple seconds. It's gone. And now he seems to be floating or standing in the middle of the street. And then he wondered how he had saved himself because he's seen it coming. And then he realized when he looked down over by the tractor that he was crushed. He's seen his crushed remains. And then realized he did not make it. So, like I said, most people, you kind of see it going on, but you get up in time. So, anyway, he's on his way to a seance. He gets crushed by a tractor. He walked up to a police officer, and then he realized that the police officer did not see him or hear him either. So people are screaming and looking away. He has now seen his own remains, so he realized he is dead. So they called for an ambulance. There was this huge commotion. So an ambulance is on its way. When it gets there, people go to pick his body up. And so as they were picking him up, the contents that were in his pocket had fell out of his pocket. His ticket for his seance, Mrs. Cumberbatch's seance, was in his pocket. It fell on the ground. One of the ambulance drivers went ahead and picked it up. And Mr. Tilly seen someone pick up, his ticket. But he was, going, in his mind, he was still going to the seance. This is all happening so very quickly. So he goes and he grabs it right out of the person's hand who was picking it up off the ground. When he does this, it disappears in front of that guy's face. So as soon as it gets into Mr. Tilly's hand and is no longer in the ambulance driver's hand, poof, it's gone. And the man who was holding it, he had an expression of amazement on his face because he knows good and well he had a ticket in his hand, and it was gone. It was a piece of paper, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It hadn't fallen on the ground. He looked around. The paper was gone. So when Mr. Tilly had it, it became invisible. And he realized, because he is also invisible. So when he had it on him, it was invisible and no one could see it. So he's just kind of taking it in, looking around. He sees Miss Ida Soulsby, and she's walking down the street. She's a little way further down the street. She's not noticing the commotion. She's someone that goes to Mrs. Cumberbatch's seances with Mr. Tilly. And so he thought, well, I'm going to go catch up with her. But as he thought that, bam, he was just right there. He was just right there beside her. He's like, I'm going to go catch up with her. Remember, he is dead, so he didn't have to like run down the street or anything. He just thought it and was right beside her. So he started talking to her and is telling her what had happened. Oh my goodness, I was on my way to the seance like you. And as I walked across the street, I slipped and fell, got rolled over by a tractor. I was killed. And as he's talking to her, she suddenly looked so startled. So he's talking to her. She looks very startled. And then she says, you know how you kind of talk to yourself when you're walking? She just says, I wonder why I received such a vivid impression of dear Teddy, you know? And Teddy is Mr. Tilly. And when she says this, he realizes, oh my goodness, how she called him, dear Teddy, that, oh my goodness, Miss Soulsby might have actually really liked him. And then he starts thinking back to all the times that he ever hung out with Miss Soulsby, because, they went to these seances like twice a week at Mrs. Cumberbatch's house. And now he's realizing that they had kind of been flirting, kind of had a thing going on. And she obviously felt his presence, because as soon as he walks up and he's just going on and on about, I just fell in the street, she gets startled, and then all of a sudden she has, of course, the, impression of dear Teddy in her head. So now he just has regret for being dead. In his mind, he was like, oh my goodness, I wish I would have known she felt this way, just with how, she said his name. And I would have asked her out. I would have done something about it. See, this is why you should always live in the moment. You never know what tomorrow could bring. He should have asked her out. But anyway, so he felt a little regret about it, because now he's dead. She can't hear him. And so a little bit of regret there for him. Now, she's headed to the seance, and then he thinks to himself, I wonder what's going on at my flat or at my house. Okay. This story is a long time ago, so he obviously called his home a flat. So he thinks this, and as soon as he thinks this, he disappears from Miss Soulsby's side. Remember, when he wanted to catch up with her, he just thought it, and he was right there. So now he's in his flat. And when he gets to his flat, he realized, wow, the news must have reached the flat and the servants, because they were all abuzz about his death. And so the servants were at the house. They were doing their thing. And the cook and the parlor maid, they were talking about the event. And the cook said, that poor little gentleman, it's a shame he never hurt a fly. And then she made the comment that, she hoped that they would take him directly to the cemetery from the hospital, because she just could not bear to have a corpse in the house. So it's like she liked him, but I kind of understand that. Like, in our day and age, we're not, if somebody passes away, we don't necessarily have their corpse in the house. We have a place for that, but anyway, that's just how the cook felt. Then the parlor maid felt a little different. She said it might serve the poor little gentleman for what happened, because he was always messing about with those spirits. Now, we already know he was on his way to a seance at Mrs. Cumberbatch's house. So obviously his servants knew that's what he, liked to do. So that's why she made this comment to the cook. But, Mr. Tilly is there. He is hearing how they feel. I mean, can you imagine? I don't think anybody was meaning this mean, but this is just, they were just talking amongst themselves. Anyway, she did say, though, that she was sorry all the same because he was pleasant and wages were paid to the day. So he took very good care of his maid, his cook. He took care of the servants at the house. But when Mr. Tilly heard them saying this, um, he was just shocked, mind blown. He considered himself a demigod to the people that worked for him. Um, so, yeah, when they referred to him as the poor little gentleman, it really irritated him. So, you know, uh, how they say, wish you were a fly on the wall. Well, he's now obviously a fly on the wall. He's not a fly on the wall. He's dead, but he's there. Anyway, so this irritated him. And so he walked up to the cook as though she could hear him, and he started letting her know that his arrangements for his funeral was all in the will, and he would not be consulting her for her convenience. Okay. Um, the cook thought she could vaguely hear him. So obviously he's angry, and he's saying this to her. So it's like she felt like she could hear him, but she went ahead and went on doing her duties. So I don't know that she heard every word he said, but I wonder if it was kind of like she felt the present like Miss Soulsby did, when he walked up to her and was telling her what had happened to him. Anyway, um, so he's upset hearing the cook and the parlor maid talk. So he wanted to give them evidence that he was present. And so he was so angry, he beat on the table. The parlor maid looked startled and asked the cook if she heard the rapping sounds on the table. And the cook just says, nonsense. You just have the jumps. You're just scared because he messed about with spirits. He has now passed away. So that's just getting to you. Just go on about your business. Just go ahead and do what you were doing. So Mr. Tilly thought that if the maid heard him, because she had the jumps, and they're pretending that nothing's going on, so he thought that if they could hear him, that he would do so much better with Miss Cumberbatch being able to hear him because she was a medium. So he knew her place well, and so he went straight to the drawing room, which was the scene of the seance. So he would go to these seances at least twice a week. So he knew right where to go. And like earlier, when he, was able just to get over to Mrs. Soulsby, like he didn't have to walk, he just thought about it and was there. So he gets to the drawing room, and at the table, there was Mrs. Cumberbatch, Miss Soulsby, and Mr. and Mrs. Marriott, and Sir John's place. So normally there were spirits guides who visited, and so Abel was there for Mr. and Mrs. Marriott about their investments. Sir John's guide his name was Messpot. And then Miss Soulsby, the guides that she usually had that would show up and talk to him was Sapphire, Napoleon, and Plato. Okay, so everybody was there at the table, but they all noticed that Mr. Tilly had not arrived yet, and he was late. And they were all ready to get started. They're all so excited about the seance. Um, but then Miss Soulsby mentioned that she felt like Mr. Tilly was near, um, and so she just wanted to wait a few more minutes. And everybody was reluctant. They were ready to, the show must go on. So they decided they would go ahead and wait. And Mrs. Soulsby got up. She was looking out the window and looking in the direction which Mr. Tilly would be walking, towards them. And then as they were waiting for him to show up, she noticed that there was an advertisement board that was going down the street. Now, this was like in the 1920s. So the way they did news and advertisement, it's a little bit different than we do it now. So they would have big boards, and someone would carry the board down the street, reporting news, things that were going on. So she notices that on the announcement board, that it mentions a terrible accident down the street near Hyde Park. And she sees it, and then she thought, oh, I'm going to close the window, because she didn't want her psychic tranquility upset by a painful accident. So she didn't want to read any more about the accident, so she just shuts the window. And then Mr. Tilly, he began to beat on the table. And so Mrs. Cumberbatch decided that they should start. So with him beating on the table, so they could all hear this small rapping noise off the table. So they assumed it was another one of the spirit guides who would show up, which would have been Abel. So they're like, okay, so the spirits are ready to go. So they decided to go ahead and start without Mr. Tilly. So Mrs. Cumberbatch started the incantations. Um, Mr. Tilly was so excited because he was, excited to talk to people in his own realm. And so he was waiting for Napoleon, who often recognized him. That's who he would normally talk with when he would go to these seances. He was also excited to see Sapphire and Messpot. So he was very excited. So he noticed that Mrs. Cumberbatch had been moaning and muttering for a long time. She'd been doing it for a moment, and no one was showing up. Not Napoleon, not Sapphire, Abel. He saw Mrs. Cumberbatch was groping for the megaphone trumpet, and then he realized he could read her mind with ease. And she was going to apply the trumpet to her own mouth and pretend to be Abel, Napoleon, or someone else. Okay, so uh, that would kind of, if I was Mr. Tilly, because he could read her mind. So I don't, I don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to have to keep going. That's very interesting, though, for him to know that she was going to be pretending to be these people. So anyway, he grabbed the trumpet, and at the shock of this, she opened her eyes. Mr. Tilly on the spiritual plane. Oh my goodness, she gasped to herself. So she opens her eyes. Everybody else has their eyes closed at the table, but she could see him. And of course, nobody else could, because he had been there, and nobody else could see him, but she could see him. She gasped, and she knew he was in the spiritual plane. And he tells her that he's been killed and wants to get in touch with the material world. That is why he is there. He also wanted to get in touch with the other spirits as well. And surely Abel or Messpot ought to be here. And then as he says this to her, she didn't answer him. Mr. Tilly asks her, so, are you a fraud, Mrs. Cumberbatch? Think of all the money I have paid you. And she starts whimpering, give me the trumpet. And Mr. Tilly tells her, no way. I would sooner use it myself. And then she comments to him, please do. She asks, what a wonderful idea. It would be so interesting to have everyone hear you talk just after you've been killed. It would be the making of me, is what she says. So now she's wanting to use him to help her along. She's doing a seance, and then he is an actual spirit. And then she let him know, I'm not a complete fraud. Spirits do communicate through me, just not all the time. So, yes, I do help it along. And she asked where he had been killed and if it hurt. And he did tell her, that he had been killed in Hyde Park, and it did only hurt for a moment, and then it just passed. And then Mr. Tilly started thinking if she was a fraud, she would not be able to see him, which is true, because nobody else can see him. Miss Soulsby seems to sense him and stuff, but she can't see him and is not actually hearing what he's saying to her. But on the other hand, Mrs. Cumberbatch, she can hear him and see him. And then he started wondering, would it seriously compromise him on the other side if he got mixed up with her and maybe she's someone to be avoided? So he starts thinking about these things, And then he asks, how can I know if I don't communicate through you that you wouldn't just make stuff up? Like, because she now knows he's dead. She can see him, she can hear him. So she's just going to make stuff up because obviously these other people, Sapphire and Napoleon, she's getting ready to do it. If he wouldn't have died, they would be having their seance tonight, and see, he sees nobody's there, so she would have been a fraud then. She'd have been making everything up. So this was a good question for him to ask. So Mrs. Cumberbatch tells him, I will turn over a new leaf, I promise. He wanted her to confess about the made-up stuff from Napoleon. She said that because him and Napoleon always spoke about a book that they'd both read. She said she had never read the book. So he wanted her to fess up to all of this. And because she said, she had never read the book, that they would discuss to prove that he was speaking with Napoleon. And then she tells him, yes, I do confess. The book was there all along. So she had put another cover of another book on that book so they couldn't see that she did actually have it there. So she read it, and then she would pretend to be Napoleon and have in-depth discussions about this book with Mr. Tilly. So after she confesses, she tells him, you can talk to them through me if you would like. As he looked in her mind, it was like a pool of muddy water. But if he entered her mind, he could speak to the others. And it was better than banging on a table that was faintly heard. So, she is a medium, so he will be able to talk through her and communicate with the others. So he was beginning to understand how this was working. And then she did tell him, just jump in. So just jump into her. And he can keep his hand over her mouth to make sure that she's not the one speaking, and he has to keep hold of this trumpet so that they will be able to hear him. So he dived into her mind. He did think it was an odd sensation. Space and time closed over him. His head swam. His eyes were heavy. And he said, here I am, really fast. And as soon as he says this, Miss Soulsby was startled and said, that's Mr. Tilly's voice. So Miss Soulsby, heard him. They're all hearing this right now. So he does tell them all that he had just passed over at Hyde Park, that a tractor had ran him over when he slipped and fell in the street. So he is telling them this. And then he started feeling the weight of the medium's mind pressing in on him and stifling and confusing him. And then he started to say, it's wonderful here. The feeling of joy and lightness. I can't tell you of the sunshine and happiness. Death is not death. It's the gate of life. And then he broke off suddenly. And then he's telling Mrs. Cumberbatch, they can't hear him, but he's speaking to her now because he kind of broke out of that where they're not hearing him. And he let her know, I can't stand this. You talk so much crap. Do get your stupid mind out of the way. So, she promised she wouldn't be this way. And when he starts telling him, she's telling him this crap about the sunshine and happiness. And yeah, he's not saying any of this. He was just telling him what happened to him. And so then he breaks from her. And then Mrs. Cumberbatch asks him for a spirit light to make a light in the room so everybody could see him and acknowledge it. And he asked her if she had any phosphorescent patches around the room. And she said, just by the chimney, there's 2, but there's none anywhere else. Just give us a nice star on the ceiling. So he proceeded to make a big red star on the ceiling. And then she whispered, thank you, Mr. Tilly. And then she asked if she'd be permitted to, photograph on occasion, if he came back, because I think she's thinking like he's going to show up twice a week to help her with her seances. So she asked if she could take a picture of this. And Mr. Tilly said, I wasn't run over to make you money. And he was letting her know that was degrading, and that right now he just wanted to come and tell everybody what had happened to him, but he wants to go out and venture and see his new world because he didn't even know what it was like yet. So he decided he was going to go find out about the new world. He didn't want to come back every week and tell everybody everything was happy and, death was just the gate lot. He, like what she was saying. No, he wanted to come back so he could actually tell them what it was actually like, not what she's been telling them every time that they have a seance. Because he felt that they needed to know the truth. and that they had all been cheated enough by Mrs. Cumberbatch. And then he told her, "Don't cheat anymore," he told her, and dropped his admittance card on the table as he left, and everyone gasped. Now remember, I said at the beginning of the story that as he was being picked up, his admittance ticket, the ticket for the seance, had fell out of his pocket and someone had picked it up. And when he took it from that person, it disappeared. So if he was holding it, it disappeared. So as he let go of it and dropped it on the table, it reappeared so they could all see it. They all gasped. That would be pretty amazing. If I was sitting in a seance at a table and just a piece of paper just emerged out of nowhere, that would be kind of trippy. Um, anyway, so um, he left. And then the news of the wonderful star and the presence of Mr. Tilly 30 minutes after his death had hit all the spiritual circles in the area. The Psychic Research Society decided that they wanted to go ahead and investigate it. Well, they concluded that Mrs. Soulsby saw the sign of the accident at Hyde Park and transferred the whole thing by telepathy to the medium. Because, we do know she looked out the window. She seen there was an accident in Hyde Park. Now, supposedly she didn't see any more of that. But anyway, when they were doing the investigation, they decided that's how that part went. So they didn't really chalk that up to nothing. As for the star, remember, because he made the bright light, they couldn't account for it. But there they did find phosphorus paint by the chimney. So they concluded that's how the star was made. So they just assumed, another trick that mediums can do. So they decided that they would reject the whole thing, which was a pity because it was actually genuine. Like Mr. Tilly had died, he did show up, but Mrs. Cumberbatch was known for a little bit of trickery, I guess. So anyway, he had left, and then they did the investigation and everything. Mrs. Soulsby did continue to be a constant attendant at Mrs. Cumberbatch's seance, but never experienced Mr. Tilly again. So it's kind of up to the viewer on what you think Mr. Tilly went off to do. It obviously looks like he found something better to do than hang out at Mrs. Cumberbatch's seances. But that is now the end of the story. So I did find that a little bit different. It wasn't like a scary story when you watch a movie and they're all around the table and the seance is going on and then there's ghosts. You're seeing it, I feel like, more from the ghost perspective. I mean, how crazy is it? Like, he really died 30 minutes before the seance and then he did show up. And how disappointed it had to be for Mr. Tilly to not get to talk to the spirits that would talk to him when he would actually pay and show up to the seances. I mean, that to me was a little bit sad. So anyway, it looks like he found something better to do at the end and not go back and make Mrs. Cumberbatch a whole bunch of money. But obviously she was a medium because she could see him. She could talk through her mind and stuff with him. The other people could not. So she is a true medium. But yeah. So what are your thoughts on this story? I thought it was pretty interesting. If you want, you can like, subscribe, leave a comment down below on what you thought of tonight's story. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for stopping in and listening, and I will be seeing you again soon. Thank you. Bye.